Hey there, polyphonic.org. This is part 2 of our series on practicing, and as mentioned in the last episode, today we will be talking about the actual nitty-gritty of what goes on in a practice session. How should you be practicing? So, item number 1, you need to warm up. Musicians are a lot like athletes in that we have muscle memory and in that we need to sort of warm our skills up. But because musicians, we don't think anyways about generally risking physical injury when we're playing, a lot of younger players skip the warming up process. This is a huge mistake. Your practice session is a time for you to be exploring and trying new things and stretching yourself. And if you don't start out from a place of great strength, then you're going to be really shaky when you're practicing those new things. Also, just as we have muscle memory, we need to be practicing that muscle memory on a daily basis, whether it's scales or arpeggios or specific techniques. One of the things that I say to all of my students is that your warm-up time is your time to remind yourself, this is what I'm good at. These are the things that I feel like I'm very confident with. Last week we talked a lot about investing in yourself and in talking about how the things that you do are much more important than the things that the instrument does, because the instrument only does what you tell it to do. Well, if you don't invest in yourself on a daily basis, if you don't remind yourself, okay, these are the things that I'm really doing well, this is the standard that I want to set, then you're never going to be able to raise that bar incrementally, just a little bit every day. So, item number 1, warm up. Item number 2, fix mistakes. We've all seen this scene. You know, a student gets up in a recital and just makes a mistake or just plays terribly. And the teacher says, oh, well, that's okay. That's okay. We'll fix it. Don't get discouraged by mistakes. And it's true that you shouldn't get discouraged by mistakes. But what often doesn't get seen in the aftermath of that performance is that student goes into the teacher's studio and then they start fixing those mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes because we're learning and we're experimenting, and that does include a certain amount of mistake making. But the single biggest mistake that you can make as a practicing musician is to let those mistakes go, is to say, oh, it'll be okay. Because, well, it won't be if you don't fix it. So, mistakes are okay, but only if you fix them. They need to be corrected. So hold yourself accountable, hold yourself to a high standard, and don't let simple little mistakes go sliding by. Fix them. Raise the bar. Item number 3. Play the percentages. Okay, so let's say you've been practicing for 20 minutes and you've been practicing really hard on this one particular excerpt or this one particular passage. And after 20 minutes you finally get it and it just sounds great and you're really happy with it. Awesome! Congratulations, you just worked really hard and got something really difficult mastered. Now for the bad news, you just spent the better part of 15 to 20 minutes practicing it in a wrong way because you practiced it in a flawed way. That's not to say that your practice time was wasted, but if you spend 90% of your time trying to get something right and only 10% of that time actually getting it right, chances are it's going to come out in the 90% range when it comes time to perform. So, getting something right, fixing a mistake, is only half the battle. You gotta hone in on that muscle memory, gotta pound it into place so that it's not gonna come loose next time. Okay. Number 4, be specific. A lot of times, in my lessons, I encourage my students to give me feedback on themselves. I often check in with them and ask them how they're doing. And most of the time, for the first couple months, I get responses like this. Oh, well, I thought it was okay. It wasn't bad. It was okay, it was good. I thought that the intonation was a little bit bad, but it was okay. Now, of course, my students are a little bit afraid of going out on a limb in front of their teachers, it sounds kind of like a trick question sometimes when the teacher asks you how you're doing. But there's a much bigger reasoning behind my questioning, which is that I want for my students to be specific, and you want for you to be specific. It's not good enough to say the intonation was bad. Well, how was the intonation bad? Was it too flat or was it too sharp? Which notes were out of tune? You see, these kinds of critiques give you something specific to fix. It gives you a direction to go in. It gives you someplace productive to go. Vague criticisms like, I thought it was not good, or I thought the intonation was bad, that doesn't really do anything but batter down your self-esteem, and that doesn't make for a very good practice time. So, be specific in what you want to improve, and be specific in what you think you're doing well. Because this is how you identify your strengths, and this is how you build that strong place up in yourself to go forth and try those experimental things that we talked about earlier, and to make mistakes in the practice session. Okay. Number 5. Divide and conquer. Okay, so we just learned it's important to be specific. Okay, so we're working on this one particular passage and just can't quite get it right. Oh, well, why would that be? Maybe the stroke is a little bit difficult, or maybe your fingers don't know quite where to go, or you don't know how to blow into the instrument in just the right way. Well, cut away all the fluff and isolate that one little bit that's giving you such a hard time, both within the music and within your technique. So if it's like a 5-bar passage that's giving you difficulty, don't play 10 bars, play 5 bars. If it's a specific technical thing, if it's something to do with your left hand for violinists, for example, if it's something to do with your left hand and speeding it up, put the bow down. Don't even look at the bow. If it's something to do with string crossings, take the left hand away and just figure out what the string crossings are like. This goes along with what we talked about last week in terms of practicing skills and not practicing the music. You isolate the thing in the music that's giving you such a hard time, and then once that one specific thing is starting to sound pretty good, then you start to put it back into context, bring the other elements of music making back into the fold. Okay, number 6. Avoid negative practice time. This is a new concept for most of my students. There's such a thing as negative practice time. Another way in which we're like athletes is that we need our reps, we need our repetitions, we need to really drill things in. Well, if you have a 15-minute practice session where your mind just isn't quite into it and you're just not there and your hands are being a little bit sloppy, well, not only are you not getting stuff done, but you're also giving yourself bad reps. You're giving yourself repetitions of a bad technique, something that you don't want to be doing, and that drags you backwards. So keep in mind how you're feeling in your practice sessions. If you're feeling a little bit beat and you find yourself justifying sloppy playing by saying things like, oh, well, I can get that when I really try. Well, you're better off just waiting until you actually do try, instead of just assuming that you can just flip a switch and have the skill be there. Number 7, take breaks. As a corollary to number 6, we just get tired. If we have marathon 4 or 5 hour practice sessions, our bodies get fatigued, we start slouching and slumping, our problem solving skills start to dull as we get further and further into the practice session. Breaks are really, really important. They help you to stay fresh, they give you a new starting point every so often, and they're just super, super important for our health. So take breaks. My personal recommendation is 5 to 10 minutes-ish per hour, but of course, you know, that varies from person to person, so don't take my word for it. Figure out what works best for you. Number 8, be persistent. We've all been there, right? Where we've been practicing something really, really hard, and we get to the end of our practice session and it's sounding great and we're so proud of ourselves, and then the next day we come back to the instrument and it's like, oh my gosh, I have no memory of how to do this anymore. That can be really frustrating, right? Well, be persistent, because when we practice, especially super, super hard stuff, it takes a while for that stuff to set in. I personally find when I'm practicing something that's on the edge of my skill set, it takes a solid 3 to 5 days for it to really set in. It takes a lot of time. I've heard it said that if it only takes you 5 minutes to learn something, then it takes you 5 minutes to forget something. So be sure to invest the time and to be patient with yourself. That, just because you got it to sound great yesterday does not mean that it's going to sound great today. You have to get it to sound great several days in a row before it'll really stick. This is a corollary to the earlier rule about percentages. You want to give yourself such incredible, overwhelming odds of success that your chances of failure just shrink right down to zero. So, invest in yourself. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Put yourself in a position to succeed. Don't batter yourself down with criticisms of, oh, I suck, or it's just not working out. Give yourself a chance. It'll be okay. So, that concludes our series on practicing. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you look forward to our next time together. Thanks. See you then.